Welcome, everyone, to Pursuing Joy, where we discuss audacious stories of joy-infused strength. I'm very excited for our guest, Grace Gavin, and I'm going to let her go ahead and introduce herself and kind of her background, where she's located, and her business, No Honesty. Welcome, Grace.
Thanks. I am so excited to be here, Julia, and I think we're going to have a fun conversation. So my name, like you said, is Grace Gavin. I am the co-founder and co-author of No Honesty and the book by the same name, also No Honesty. Important for listeners to note that that's KNOW, a little bit of a play on words there, where I get to help clients every day have more real conversations, get healthy in that aspect and not avoid tough, difficult conversations and help them with some simple, tangible, and implementable practices that we've developed. So it's a joy that I get to do that all the time. I don't know if anybody else has done that play on words before on your podcast, but I had to. So
No, it's awesome. And so I wanted to read the entire book before this episode. I was listening to it on Audible, and by the way, you have a very nice, soothing voice. So anybody that wants to get the book, I recommend the Audible version of it. I was able to I got to chapter 3 yesterday, and then it said at the end of chapter 3 that the most important chapter is chapter 4. So I was like, okay, I've got to cram that in because I want to make sure I get the most important chapter. So I'm going to direct us kind of through the questions through the book and how you're implementing this in real life, maybe in your life, and also then in giving this really good tool to other businesses. And then we will segue into your working genius and then how working genius could possibly overlap with this concept or just be an added tool to it. So so the essentials for communication, and if I am regurgitating this information in any way out of order or incorrectly, just interrupt me. But the essentials for communication are honesty and openness. And then when you get down to honesty and openness, you have truly and freely you, true condition, about you, and then in openness, listening without reservation, taking it in and letting it go, and about others. And I can see how those kind of pair up with each other. So can you share a summary or some insight into the essentials of honesty and give examples either in your life or again in the business part of things as well?
Oh, absolutely. And I think what's really important for listeners to know is the big distinction between honesty and openness, because a lot of times we just clump them together and say, be open and honest, or I'm going to be open and honest. And they're two very different skills.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we break them apart in the book and have to look at it differently, because a lot of times we just think about ourselves in communication. And that doesn't really work if we're in a conversation with somebody else,
Right.
But yet we all do it. And so honesty as we define it is listening without reservation, honesty as we define it. I'm getting them mixed up now, and I just told people not to do that.
Truly and freely you.
This is the important part. This is why we work on this. This is why even being an open and honest expert, I still do this work every single day because we're in conversations every single day. So honesty is being truly and freely yourself, speaking into what you want and how you feel. And sometimes that can be really difficult for people. And also that definition as a whole can be overwhelming at first of what does that mean? What does that look like? So that's why we break it down into the 3 essentials. So you have the first one of truly and freely you. So that's like the conversation, if you want to think about it, around authentic self and knowing who you are. And can you be yourself in this room? Does it feel relaxed? Can you walk in and do you not feel like you have to armor up, but take a deep breath and make a funny joke or an observation, just being who you are and not feeling like you have to project some type of facade. The next one in honesty is true condition. And this is about accepting the facts and reality around us, because a lot of times we just don't deal in reality. We either like to have it be a rose-colored version of everything's fine, it's going fantastic, and we're not being honest with ourselves about what's really going wrong. Or on the other side of that, it's all doomsday chicken little. The sky is falling, everything is terrible. And that's not the reality of our situation either. And so really working to be honest with ourselves, have the people around us be honest, so we get the most real picture of what the true condition is, the facts and reality around us. And then lastly, the third essential of honesty is about you. So it's your half of the conversation, your opportunity to share your thoughts, your wants, your opinions, where you're at. It's your time. And also being really clear that you can only share your honesty, keeping it about you. You can't share somebody else's. So if I were to say, well, this is what Julie said, I would never say it in the way that you would specifically, with the words you would use, the tone, the body language, things like that. So honesty being about ourselves, our opportunity to share, and keeping it just about ourselves. That's one half of the equation. Then we have the openness side of things. And this is where a lot of people, a lot of leaders get it wrong, because we think open means being an open book or being transparent, sharing everything about our lives. To a certain extent, that's great, but that's still the honesty side of things. It's still about me, myself, and I. And so the question becomes, okay, well, where is the other person in the conversation? And that's where we really shift how we think about openness today. And so openness, as we define it, is listening without reservation, putting your needs and wants on pause for someone else. And I want listeners just to think for a moment, how well do you think you're doing that today? How well are you actually listening to people? Listening to understand them, by the way, not to just respond. How well are you putting aside any reservations you might have? How well are you pausing your wants, your needs, whatever you need to get out of this conversation, to just hear what the other person has to say? Really thinking about that for a moment. And then the three essentials of openness. The first one is listen without reservation. So like I already said, are we listening to understand the person, or are we listening just to respond? Am I just going to jump in with my next thought? Or have I actually heard what your question was or heard what you had to say, paused for a moment and had a thoughtful response? And the second part of that, without reservation, we picked that word reservation very specifically to represent, one, any reservations that we might have, but also any preconceived notions, judgments, all of the things that get encompassed of that. Like I have a client that they had an individual who's always had a new idea, and mostly every new idea was kind of terrible. Like, we're not really going to implement those. And so they started to create this judgment of any idea this individual would bring to the table, and they weren't ever actually open to it. And then this individual started to get frustrated and felt like he wasn't being heard. Well, no surprise, he really wasn't, because we were already putting a judgment upon him, and the ideas that he had to bring in. And some of them were actually pretty good ideas, but we didn't hear them because we already had our judgments up and we had our reservations. So that's the first essential. The second essential is taking it in and letting it go. For me, this can sometimes be the hardest one, because we got the first part of taking it in. We're actually hearing what they have to say. Okay, good. But then we got to process it, work through it, and let it go. Because a lot of times what we do is we let things that other people say stay stuck inside us, especially the negative type of things. Like, think about any feedback you've ever gotten, or somebody says something that you don't quite agree with. And now, because I don't agree with you on this piece here, Julie, I probably don't agree with you on this one, this one, and this one. Well, that's probably not entirely true. We're probably a lot closer aligned than we realize. But because I have an inability to let go of that one piece where we don't align, now I can't figure out where we see things similarly. And this happens with grudges, with previous unmet expectations, things like that, that it's just, can we work through our ability, process it, and then let it go? Because if we don't, then we remain closed. We are not open. We are stuck. And what the real killer of this is that it only affects us. If you say something that upsets me and I never work through it and I never have an ability to let it go, you probably really don't know about it. You have no idea. So it just stays with me. It irritates me, or it bothers me, or it frustrates me. And I hold on to it and hold on to it and hold on to it. And one of the things that we say in the book is what you hold on to is holding you down. And so what are all these negative things that you have been unable to take in, process, and let it go, to then return to more openness? That's the second essential of openness. And then the last one, so simple, but so important, is that openness is about others. Right? We talk about honesty being about ourselves.
Right.
Well, if we want it to be about us, at some point, then it should probably be about others. We live in this shared world of 8 billion people, and yet we only think about me, myself, and I. How do I get my needs served? How do I get what I want? Well, what about the other person? What about the person on the other side? How do I make this about others? Especially in leadership conversations, man, you got to make it about others. You got to make it about the team members around you. You got to make it about the people that you're leading. What do they want? What do they need? How do we understand that in the context of this organization?
Mm-hmm.
Are we really taking an opportunity to make it about others? Because then we have the exchange of communication. If I'm just talking at you the whole time, I mean, what's the point of you even being here?
Right.
So
Right. No.
those are the differences. Those are the essentials.
So I was talking to a guest yesterday about conflict, and he mentioned that if you don't have the courage to have the conflicting conversation and to bring up where something went wrong and have that dialogue, then you start looking at that person as that becomes their character because you never approach. And so it does, if you don't let it go, and I think approaching it that way is a way of letting it go. And actually, of all the essentials, I think that one stood out to me as well. And the not letting those things cling to you. I mean, I know people who have received feedback from 20 years ago that are criticism. I won't even call it feedback. That now that they have adjusted the way they present themselves just from holding on to that stigma that they apparently believed about themselves. So that makes total sense to me. Can you elaborate a little bit on why you think in the business world we find honesty as a threat as far as like an employee or in a meeting? Why do we feel threatened by honesty in that environment?
Yeah, that is such a great question. I think I'll speak to what I see happening in my own leadership and also for my clients is that when somebody else being honest with us feels like a threat, it is because we are not solid in our foundation. We do not know who we are. We do not understand our full honesty. So we don't know who we truly and freely are. So somebody being honest with us about maybe our faults or our failings feels like an attack because we might believe that, or some core level, like deeper level insecurity of us might believe that because we haven't done the work to be solid in our own foundation. Mm-hmm. And so it feels very scary. It feels very threatening. And then the other side of it, we've also not worked through taking it back to the ability to let it go. We haven't worked through that. And so we just let it sit with us and bother us and bother us and bother us rather than having ways to work through it. All right, what was good about this honesty that I received? What can I take and learn from it? What is maybe not relevant and just somebody was venting or needed a space to just share their frustrations? And what can I let go of instead of continuing to hold it on? I think that's where it ends up being a threat because really, if somebody is being honest with us in this culture that we have in our society now, it's such a gift. Mm-hmm. It is such a gift. And the more that we treat it like a threat, the less we will receive honesty and the less we will have access to that true condition. People will just kind of tell us what we want to hear, and we will live in a world of fantasy, of dysfunction. Right. And then we'll wonder, why doesn't anything work? Or why is it so much harder to get a meeting on the books or this project across? Well, because you're not living in reality.
Right.
And so you got to, not only do you have to do the project and the hard work of that, but you also have to fight against the fantasy that you think you're living in.
Right. Right. Can you think of an environment that you've been in where you feel like being honest was a threat to your job, or have you had other people say that they're not honest because they feel like it's a threat to their employment?
Oh, absolutely. I have it with a lot of clients, interestingly enough. So anytime I work with a client, I first make it a requirement that I work with their leadership level for this exact reason. And then I'll oftentimes work at their management level doing the same training. And what's interesting is as you go lower down in the organizational chart or the accountability chart, there's more fear of being honest with the next level up, because one of the direct quotes that I had from a manager one time was like, Grace, really, how honest can I be with them? Like, these are the people who sign my paychecks. Mm-hmm. So they don't really want me to be honest with them. And the reason I say I require leadership to go through it first is I say, hey, look, they've already gone through this training. They've had these conversations like you're having, and they are investing in this work, not only monetarily, but also the time for you to be here. And so I'm not saying that they're always going to get it perfect or that you're going to get exactly what you want when you're honest with your leadership, but I am saying that they're working towards it. And so yeah, it definitely does become a fear. And then other people that I've had come up to me at talks, I remember this one gentleman, he's like, well, what do you do if your leadership doesn't want this? And really you've got 3 choices in the way that I see it. Your choice 1 is you can, bring this to your leadership and say, hey, this is a gap that I'm seeing, kind of a managing up, if you will. This is something I'd like for us to work on, and hope that your leadership is open to it, that they're going to listen without reservation, that they won't have that fear about what does this mean about me? Am I not a good leader? All of those things, and reject it because of that. So that's option 1, bring it to them, do a kind of a manage up, show off these skills, show the benefits of them. 2, you can kind of just remain stuck where you're at and deal with it, if you will. I hate that option for people. I really do, because that's bringing suffering upon yourself, the people you're working with, also into your home life.
Yes.
But it's an option. And then the last one is to leave, because there are organizations. I mean, I have multiple clients that are doing this work, that are working towards more open and honest cultures. And so they're out there. I promise you that you can find them. You just have to make the choice to leave, to stay stuck there, or maybe to manage up, and maybe there is an opportunity for growth there within your organization.
Yes, I think the honesty and openness works when you're going into a conversation with the value of communication. Mm-hmm. You're not that's the ultimate goal, is to have communication take place versus getting a point across. And sometimes even I know in life overall, efficiency is really a high value over communication. I know that if my children are going to experience negativity from me, it's usually between the house to the car, right? Like okay, you feel this way, but I need to get you here and we need to get there. So we're going to efficiently go through this, and I'm probably not going to hear you. And then everybody's agendas, their schedules, meetings are scheduled for this amount of time, right? And so I feel like efficiency gets in the way as far as if that's more of a value than the actual communication. I noticed at the end of chapter 3 and chapter 4, the idea of slowing down came up for both honesty and openness. And so alignment was brought up, and then being, triggered by your emotions. And so in both chapters, to achieve honesty and to achieve openness, the idea of just slowing down, pausing, and processing brings you more in line with who you are, versus being triggered by what I perceive as emotions triggering you to go back to an old version of yourself, or an old coping mechanism, like digging into something in the back of the past is typically, to me, what triggers somebody to come out of alignment with who they are today. How do you get businesses and leadership to come to that conclusion?
Yeah, it's so interesting, because you're right on the efficiency side of things. I was just working with a team yesterday, and it is wild how many times they talked about, well, I just said I agreed because it was easier, it was going to be faster. And then we ended up having to have another conversation, and then we had to go back and ask another question. I was like, so did you really save time? Did you really? And they were like, no, I guess not. I said, okay. And how long would it probably have taken for you to just state your concern or where you were at? And a couple different times. One of them was 10, 15 seconds, 2 minutes. Oh, okay. So let me be clear. We skipped over the tough emotional part of having 10, 15 seconds of discomfort, maybe 2 minutes, to then have to go back and have another half-hour conversation, then another hour conversation, not to mention all the scheduling to make sure that those happen, because not everybody's schedule is the same. And then we have to follow up on those meetings and those to-dos and make sure, is everybody good, or we got all the things. So was it really more efficient? Never.
Right. Yeah.
It's never more.
You're undoing so much to redo what you didn't cover. Oh,
and then the other side of the slowing down, that is why, like, you can certainly, for individuals out there listening to this, you can take our book, read it, and do the work on your own in your personal life. You can take it to your organization and work through it as a team. But what happens, the difference of why teams bring me in, is not only so they don't have to think through how do I design this training, but also because it gives them the space to slow down, to actually pause and think, okay, how would I do this differently? How, when we talk through scenarios or situations, or we're doing role plays, here's my gut instinct. Here's the risks of that. Here's the risks on the other side if I don't do that. And that's where the slowing down happens, because, again, like we talked about, the efficiency, that is such a high value in our culture now, to just move quick. AI is only speeding things up, which is great in some areas. But then the question becomes, what are we missing because of that? Or what are we skipping past? What are we not slowing down enough to recognize? Because I believe it's Viktor Frankl. He talks about the powers in our response. And that's where we get to choose something different. And there's just a little bit of pause, that if you can lengthen that between the trigger, or if something happens, the pause, and then choosing your response. So having a response versus a reaction, that is where your growth lies. And it doesn't take that long, which is interestingly enough. Like, I have a lot of leaders that come to me, they're like, Grace, this is great, but I don't have time to have these long, open and honest conversations with my people all the time. I just don't have time for that. Like, it doesn't have to be an hour sit down every time. It can be a 5-minute check-in. Hey, where are you at on this? Open and honest. And here's where I'm struggling. Those types of things. Quick check-ins. It doesn't have to be these long, drawn-out conversations that we build up in our minds, I'll say.
No, we all need to practice this more. So let me ask you this. How are you practicing what you preach? How does this materialize in, like, real life for you?
Oh, so many different ways. I think about in my personal life, I'm always working on improving those relationships, because a lot of times our personal lives are a little bit harder because we have these relationships that have evolved in a certain way that we, as kids, you don't necessarily think, this is how I want to have this relationship. It just is what happens. And so I think through, how do I continue to evolve those? In my work life, we talk about this all the time within our teams. My co-founder, Ken Bogart, he'll come to me with an idea and he's like, hey, I just need you to be open to this, because he knows that I am an integrator through and through. I like my processes. I like to have things laid out in a certain way. So if you're going to bring a new idea to me, my immediate reaction, which is not the response that I want to have, but my immediate reaction is, nope, we're good the way we are. We got things going. And I get to that efficiency, that autopilot. To be clear, if you have anybody teaching you anything who says they are an expert in it and they get it perfectly every time, do not trust them. Okay? Do not trust them. I am an expert in this. I've literally wrote the book and I still have to work on it. So Ken will come to me and say, hey, I got a new idea. I just need you to be open to it. And just in that, having that common language between the two of us, I'm like, yes, okay. Let me pause what I'm doing. Let me actually hear what you have to say. Think for just an extra second. How would this apply to our business? Is this something we can do right now? Is this something we should wait a quarter on? And so we have those kind of conversations at least every week.
Okay. Yeah. So I realized, I think it was in the first two chapters where it came up that when we're not using honesty, then we grab for control, or if we feel like someone's not being honest with us. I have a history of a relationship where the honesty was not not often used. There was a lot of deception. And so whenever I start to pick up on someone not being honest with me, I feel that old coping mechanism, and control overall is, we're all dealing with that, but it comes up tenfold when I feel like someone isn't being honest with me. And I had a instance recently where I felt that, and I felt that I was going back into that control mode, and I didn't like how I was showing up. And so I shut down on the communication. And so it all fell apart just with that lack of honesty coming in at the beginning, and then how I am responding to that with the need to control, which wasn't the proper response either. It was more like, backing up and like, let's get back down to the roots of this. So really, I appreciated the wording for that when I read the book, because I knew I had felt this happening, but then to put words to it, okay, lack of honesty equals I show up wanting to be more controlling. And if you put that in a team environment, I can see where things shut down. Why do people call you? As in, what are they noticing? And are they noticing things like that? Like, what is their pain point that they're saying, this is what we're struggling with? And are they right? Or do you have to introduce them to what where you see the breakdown is?
Yeah, it's interesting because there are so many other solutions out there that we think will work when it's really the foundational problem of communication. So, for example, people will come to me and they're really struggling with getting their projects done and out the door. And they think, well, if we just have a better project management system, like we'll get a new software and that'll solve it. And then it doesn't solve it. Mm-hmm. And then they think, well, we'll just hire a person to close that gap, to be the go-between sales and project delivery. And that works a little bit because you're adding some communication, but it's still not entirely clear. Well, what really becomes the issue is that you've got this division between your sales department and your operations or your project delivery department, because they don't talk to each other. They don't have the communication. A client I was just working with recently, one of their big takeaways is just how they were from all different departments. We had sales in there, we had client services, we had operations, delivery side of things, we had HR was in there too, all these different functions. And one of their big takeaways was, even though we are in so many different departments, I didn't realize that we all deal with very similar issues, that we all we're somewhat on the same page. But a lot of times it doesn't feel like that, because it feels like sales and project delivery are butting heads because they have to, quote unquote, fight for resources. But when you start dividing teams in that way, where it's like sales versus operations, or I see it sometimes within different sales teams, like it's team 1 versus team 2. And I'm going to steal this prospect away from this team so that our team has the numbers and the wins. Well, that doesn't really work, because you're just taking money from the revenue and putting it over into this bucket instead, when you could spend that energy going out and getting new revenue for the business. Right. And so a lot of what I see, what people come to me for, is there's just divisions, and people are, there's either very toxic infighting, or they're not communicating at all. Or we find out about issues when they have blown up into a big, huge problem, and we could have solved them when they were at a tiny little micro problem. But that just keeps happening over and over and over, because nobody feels like they can be honest at this tiny little moment. And now they have to be, because it's this big, huge, unavoidable issue.
Right.
We could have dealt with it here and it would have been, again, that 2-minute conversation. Now it's a week long and we've lost a client because of that. So those are the types of things that I see. And then on the positive side, there are companies out there who are just investing in their culture and they've recognized how important it is. And they want to invest in their people and their professional development. So those are the two sides of the coin.
Okay. Have you ever had a client not believe you that this matters? Or like, oh, that was great. Okay, but that's not really our issue. Have you ever had a resistance overall?
Yeah, I would say not any clients, right? Because they've recognized that they need to work on it, but plenty of now clients that were prospects prior that they were like, yeah, I think we're good here. And then they'll call me up about 6 months later and they say, yeah, remember when you said that this leader was resistant because they were trying to hide that they weren't performing well? Well, we ended up having to fire them, and now half of that department is left, and it's kind of a big problem. Okay, well, let's work through that. We can work through it before, but we can do it now. We can fix this. So I would say a lot more on that side of things.
Okay, that totally makes sense. Which came first, the team development, the business aspect, or the book?
The book initially. So Ken is also an expert EOS implementer, and through working with him, helping teams implement EOS, we just kept seeing this recurring issue of communication where they would put the best system in place. In my opinion, that's EOS. They had the best software. They hired the 18 players, but they still, even at a leadership level, had just an inability to communicate, aka an inability to be honest with each other, an inability to be open to each other. And they would suffer and it would be really hard. And they would get in and they would do their quarterlies, but man, was it like a fight versus the teams who had higher abilities to be honest and to be open. And we didn't have all the language at that time, but that's really what it was. And they were scrappy and they didn't have the resources that they needed to get everything done. But they still, I mean, they laughed. They had more higher project completion rates. That's the team that you wanted to bet on. And so we're like, well, we needed to do something about that. And it was initially just going to be a book. And then people kept asking like, wait, hang on. How do I do this? How do I make more of this? Okay, well, here comes the business side of things.
Okay, awesome. All right. Is there a big takeaway from the book or what you offer, or something that is like puts a ribbon around the whole concept for you? Or along those lines, if someone comes up to you and says, what do you do? Right. What is the summary of that?
Well, I'll give you my little line, which is that I help teams and organizations have real, healthy communication through simple, tangible, and implementable practices. And if people are looking to do this work on an individual level, one of our 6 practices is the pursuit of honesty assessment, which I know that you took. And it just gives you the real-time data on where you're at with your ability to be honest and open. And so I encourage people, that's free to take on our website, to go check that out. And what's really important, and I think maybe will also lead us into the conversation around working genius, but when you get your results, they're just the numbers on where you're at. And so I encourage people to take them and then not put any judgment upon yourself if your scores are lower or higher or different than where you thought they were going to be. They're just your starting point. We're just getting a baseline of the data. And so that is a really great place to start for those people that are listening.
It makes you really think when you're looking at those questions. They're not questions that you would typically ask yourself or be rating yourself on. And so you have to be honest with yourself in that moment too. So I was happy to see that I was between like 68 and I think 72% on both, but I would love, that to improve as well. I think the idea of showing up differently in different spaces is rarely brought out when you're asking those questions, because you're asking those questions of where you're open and honest in different scenarios as well. Yeah. So do you feel like this has brought in your perspective on how you show up like across the board?
Say that again.
So if let's just say the example of Gino's story in there of like, I had all these people at my birthday party, but I was this person to my neighbor, to my business, to my wife, to client. Like he felt like he was different in all those. Do you feel like doing this work has helped you become that authentic across the board person, or were you already there?
Oh, no, I was not already there. Are you kidding me? I mean, this is part of the reason we wrote the book is because we went through the struggles. And if I can help somebody skip that leadership gap between here's where I struggled, here's what I learned, and help you go through that a little bit faster, is fantastic. But I do think one of the things we talk about is this being a pursuit. So you're never 100% of the time, but it has definitely helped me to come more in alignment with myself. Like I think about, there was a board that I was on last year, and it was very strange because in my work life and my personal life, I show up pretty bold. Like here's what I think, this is my opinion, those types of things. But I was on this board, and that was not happening. And I was just kind of sitting back, meek, and not speaking up when I saw a gap or thought, well, that's maybe a problem. And so I really had to look at what is happening here. Why am I not being truly and freely myself? What is impacting me here? And it was a combination of my perceived lack of the other people's openness. Like I thought maybe they wouldn't be so open to me. I was one of the youngest ones on the board at the time. And so I had some head trash around that young age equating to not having value, which I don't believe is true, but that's kind of what was coming through. And so I had to work through that. And it was a great learning opportunity of, well, I'm out of alignment here. What's going on? And what needs to be fixed here? What kind of conversations need to happen? So it's an ongoing journey all the time, but it does help me think about it just a little bit more intentionally. And I can tell if there's a place that I've gone that I was not being truly and freely myself, because like in Gino's story, like it zaps your energy. I leave feeling exhausted. And that is not somewhere that I either need to figure out why that's happening, or maybe that's not a spot for me to go back to. Because I don't want to show up exhausted in the rest of my life. That's not the kind of version of grace that my family deserves. They don't want to have the exhausted version. My team, I'm not going to give them my best ideas if I'm exhausted because I'm projecting this facade the whole time, being somebody I'm not. And so that's not fair to all the rest of the people in my life, let alone not being fair to me either.
Right. No, and that is a perfect segue into Working Genius, because it does tap into energy and how you're showing up and exhaustion and being able to come home to your family energized and ready for that next phase of the day. But I also want to highlight where you were talking about pursuing, being that this is pursuing joy. I'm not going to have anybody on here, including myself, that is just like, I have arrived in joy. And that's why I'm here to tell my story, because I'm there. And I think anything is a pursuit. And if we can just give grace to ourselves that we're not going to arrive, whether it's on, pursuing the ultimate recovery, or pursuing righteousness, or pursuing joy, or pursuing honesty. We are, as long as we're open to growth, then, and that's what I tell my girls all the time, like as when they're looking for a partner later on, look for the growth of where they are open to growth so that you all can grow together. So for pursuing, I think that in and of itself is a fantastic goal. All right. So going into Working Genius, this has been a very interesting week for me overall, because I've been interviewing Working Genius facilitators, and my geniuses are wonder and discernment. And a good portion of the people I've interviewed, their frustrations have been wonder. And then this week, I have been interviewing people with the geniuses of wonder and discernment. And I saw that yours wonder and discernment. And I thought, and it's interesting. So this is interesting to me on several levels, because when you just said that you are an integrator through and through, I posed as an integrator for a year or so and was like, I am not an integrator through and through. Christy Clayton very gently, when I was coaching with her to be an integrator, she's like, I need to tell you something. You are a visionary. Okay. So I have associated that with my wonder, and then seeing that you are wonder and discernment, but the opposing side of that is your competencies are enablement and tenacity. And those are my frustrations. And so we don't mirror each other's competencies, and we're frustrated by each other's competencies. And I also noticed this a little bit in our communication, because my third one is galvanizing, and galvanizing is one of your frustrations. And so you show up very steady and ready to put the process into the wonder and discernment portion. And I show up like, let's get this going. And so the wonder and discernment show up similarly in our like leadership style, but then when we come in with our competencies, the integrator tends to come out in you. And that's when my visionary with the invention starts showing up. So, but one of the things that, so I'm just going to read this. So we are both very reflective and intuitive, and wired to ask big questions that reflect deeply and go beyond the surface. And I mean, the fact that you wrote the book, No Honesty, right, is you see that in like what you're explaining, and even your stories versus Ken's stories, the way that y'all show examples. I see you going deeper in those when you're reading. And so there was something in the summary of who we are, and it brings up that we have a proclivity to nuance. And I've struggled with those terms. And I'm a big word, like I'm a word nerd. So I love to go and look at definitions all the time. And so a proclivity to nuance means that someone is naturally disposed to recognizing and valuing these subtle differences, whether in a work of art, a conversation, or a philosophical concept, or even in a person's behavior. Mm-hmm. So we are in meetings, and this is why I personally don't like to have phone conversations or conversations where I can't see someone's face or their body language, because I want to know truly how they are receiving. So did you read your report?
Yeah, I think this is interesting because you're pulling out different parts that I didn't necessarily pick up on, because I was thinking about, I think we talked about this before, but I had previously taken Working Genius, and you said, well, it'd be interesting to see if you shift, because I had previously was at the time the co-founder was, still working through the book. And what's very interesting is that they had shifted. So I was focused on, okay, what had changed? Because it, like you said, it was now wonder and discernment. And before it was, I think I still had wonder in there, but it was tenacity. So it was wonder and tenacity. So I was just interested on the shift of it. But yeah, looking through, I don't know. I mean, I'm loving the conversation that we're having now, because I'm just learning and thinking about it differently. But yeah, I agree. I agree on the phone call side of things. I mean, I'm happy to call people up and have a conversation, but if I can get you in person, I mean, virtual is okay. I like that. You can still kind of see where people are at. You can see if they're engaged or not, but nothing tops in person for me. Nothing tops that.
Right. No, I'm the same. And I'm typically very curious. Mm-hmm. And I know that comes up in the book too, that you need to approach things with more of a curiosity. Mm-hmm. And I'm a big fan of conflict should create curiosity. Yeah. And so and then just the discernment, and we both want to ask a lot of why questions. Mm-hmm. And I've also noticed that we don't typically we don't exactly love those questions coming back at us. We want to know that about others and show up in that way. And also, why doesn't always go over well in meetings, right? Like I have the question, why are you even asking this? Why does that even matter? Well, to me, it matters a lot. So I find those, and that shows up in the discernment as well, as far as like when you were discussing ideas. Is this really a good idea? Should we really take this on? And so it's a necessary part of work as well. And so I feel like in the book, you're kind of peeling the curtain back on what is actually going on. And I feel like Working Genius gives us the language to facilitate that curtain pulling back a little bit more, because to me, this is the way work is happening, and it's an altitude. This is the way work is happening, whether we're noticing it or not. This is the way communication is breaking down, whether we're noticing or not. Like picking, we like what you were talking about with we'll try this and we'll try this. But that's actually not the root of the problem. And so I feel like Working Genius gives that language as well. So it will start with wonder, those questions of walking into a room and why are we doing things like this? Or why haven't we tried this? Why is this occurring this way? And just this not even necessarily wanting to change anything, just honest curiosity, right? And then invention shows up and says, well, let me give you an idea of how to fix that situation that you just brought up, or let me give you they just fuel ideas. And so that's a necessary component. And then discernment is asking, are these kind of vetting the ideas? We threw a lot of things at the wall here. Now let me going into big picture thinking, seeing this all the way down the line, not necessarily being able to get it all the way down the line, just being able to see it all the way down the line, and saying, is this even a good idea, or how can we tweak this? And then galvanizing has now received the why we are doing this, because discernment has vetted it. And galvanizing, and you can see this is a big one for me when I'm hiring salespeople. And I've seen a thing here as I'm talking to people too, that trainers are more in the galvanizing, but teachers tend to fall more in the enablement category. But the galvanizer is more of that energetic, getting everybody on board and checking in with people and getting them re-excited about the project like weeks down the line. And then enablement is that person that is, I will help you in whatever capacity you need to, not necessarily in just how you need, and showing up for everybody. They also can be burned out very easily by doing that. And not because it doesn't give them energy, but they will take on too much of what other people are doing, but a very necessary component, again, to getting work done. And then tenacity is that detailed individual that is going to take things across the finish line, where it started with this question, and now tenacity is the one taking it across. And so as far as energy and exhaustion and meetings, if you are more in the enablement and tenacity, brainstorming is going to take you out. You want to walk in and say, give me the report, what I need to do, and I will get it done. And then the brainstorming people, the WIs up here, do not want to think about that lesser altitude. And there are people, and I love to talk to them, who have what you said it was WT, right? Like originally you had and tenacity. And to me, that is such a huge leap. And those people are very inspiring to me, to be able to ask the question and get the stuff done. So when I was thinking about how you were discussing, the communication as far as showing up in a no honesty room, right? Like where you're driving home this concept. I feel a lot of guilt that I do not have tenacity. And so previously I would show up trying to prove that I had that because I thought that was the most valuable thing. But if you are able to go in and say, I am actually frustrated in tenacity, and find someone to collaborate with you on the project. Now you're not going to get out of everything. You're not going to be able to say, I'm not good at this, therefore that's my frustration. But being able to say, hey, this is my frustration and I am going to need more time on this. Or I am going to need someone to come in and collaborate with me on this that does have tenacity, and bringing into the conversation. And I can't think of anything more open and honest than being able to say, I need help, and someone saying, I'm open to helping you with this,
Mm-hmm.
instead of saying, that person's just lazy because they don't show up well here. So that's where I kind of see where giving the language, and there's a lot of assessments out there as far as, the predictive index, the DISC, and Myers-Briggs, the Enneagram. All of that to me is great, especially in knowing yourself. But it's not very simple to have someone else like look at your numbers. Oh, this is how I should communicate with this person. But if you know where they fall in the acronym widget, it's very simple to say, hey, wonder, we're down here now in this altitude. And so we're going to, not keep you from participating, but keep you from participating in wonder at that moment, instead of just getting frustrated. Like, why are you taking us back up here in the brainstorming phase when we've got down here? You can just say, hey, we're not in wonder right now. And it gives that, it allows someone else to not judge you and just communicate with you in an open and honest way that isn't critical, isn't judgmental, and doesn't have anyone leaving feeling guilty. So based on where your changes happened and what you saw in that, what do you see? Well, let me ask you, are there assessments overall that you've used in the process?
Yeah, so there's not a specific assessment that I use with my clients other than our own, because, and you touched on this, what I find a lot of times is that the assessments are all self-focused. So that's the honesty side of things. And like we talked about earlier, you have to be strong in your foundation of knowing who you are. Okay, I'm a wonder discernment individual. So if you get me into galvanizing, that is going to be tough. It's tough. That's good for me to know that about myself. And it's easier always for us to focus on ourselves and to retain information about ourselves. But if you ask me to retain that for my entire team of 5 or my team of 6, that becomes a little bit more difficult. Mm-hmm. But what I can do and what I can work on is one thing, which is being open. So Julie, you saying tenacity really frustrates me, and I'm open to that. Like, okay, I hear what you're saying. I'm pausing my need to get this project done for just a moment, right? We're not pausing it forever. We still got to go get work done.
Right.
But let's pause that for just a second. Hear what you have to say. Okay. Now what do we do with that? And so that's the part that I find that's really missing, and what I spend a lot of time talking with clients about is the openness side of things. Because you can know what your working genius is. You can know that, I mean, there's so many assessments out there to know about ourselves, but then where is it about the team? Where is it about the other person on the other side? So we have to have both. They're really important. You have to be strong in your solid foundation of yourself. And because of that, because you're strong on your side and the other person is strong on their side, now we got to figure out, how do we come together and work? How are we open to each other to figure that out? So if these are your numbers, okay, great. Here we are coming from. We still need to get this project done.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So how do we work on that? And not just staying stuck of, well, I am best at wonder, so that's the only place that I'm going to stay. Well, let me have a little bit of openness and realize this is what the team needs, and figure out, is it going to be me that gets this done or somebody else, or can I help and support somebody? But where's that openness side of things? I think that's what I really think is the biggest leadership gap right now, because we can take all the information about ourselves, but if we don't have somebody who's open to it on the other side, it almost doesn't matter. I mean, it's a great thing to know about yourself and have some more self-discovery and self-awareness. But where does it go? What does it matter?
Right. And yeah, so this gives you the cohesion and where the team and the productivity. For me, when I finally had that moment, I was because I was like, why does this joy and why does that even matter? Well, like, and it felt it felt very abstract. But when you can say how it shows up in actual productivity, now you have a concrete, solid reason to pursue to pursue that and to pursue your joy, because you are now showing up and you're more authentic, energetic self, and it actually fuels the entire team. And again, we can get very bogged down and stuck in roles, and to say, hey, well, that's your job. Well, if we can collaborate, then, and this actually fuels you and brings you joy and energy, why would we not do that? And even in my interview process now, speaking of honesty, I will ask people what tasks they are currently doing or have done that make them feel more energetic when they go home, and what makes them want to take a nap when they get home. And one of my bigger questions is, what is your dream job? And if someone can tell me that if they're telling me that their dream job and they're listing the exact job description that I am interviewing them for, I'm like, you're not being honest.
Yeah.
You're not showing up honestly in this interview. There's no way when you were 6 years old, you're thinking, oh, I mean, they wouldn't have the vocabulary then.
Right.
Like, what did you want to do? And overall, it's not going to give me a concept of them fitting in this job or not fitting in this job because they wanted to be an author, or they wanted to be a librarian, or they wanted to go to space. But it does tell me, when they are describing to me why that was their dream job, what actually fuels them, and if the tasks will fuel them in the same way, that they will show up as their best self when they get there. And I didn't even think about it being an honesty type question, but when people started doing that, I was like, okay, this is this actually
absolutely, because yes, we talk about this all the time, especially in interviews. It's the fake it till you make it type of thing. Well, wouldn't you so much rather, Julie, have somebody come to you and say, hey, interviewing for this position, and I know I'm really good at these 5 things. These 5 things excite me. I'm not good at these 3, but if you give me the tools and the resources, I can figure it out, or here's how I would work on it, or something like that. I would rather hire that person every single time than somebody said, yeah, I could totally do this and it's fine. And I hire them and they know 2 things out of the list of 10.
Yes.
Versus having 5 of them. I'd rather have that. Please.
Yes. And I love that, because I can actually coach people in the interview without, because people always talk about how they don't get feedback. I've heard this over and over, and there's legal reasons why people don't typically get feedback. But the feedback that I give is, your resume looks like this, but you actually don't find joy and energy in what you're doing. And these are this is how I know that. And so I can't pass you along because you actually find joy and energy in these types of things. And so I would ask you to consider these things, or even having them as some kind of outlet in your life if you do continue to go towards this career setup as well. And I'm truly passionate about putting people with their actual passions, because I'm doing a disservice to the company and the individual if I bring them in because they can do the job versus finding energy and joy in it as well. So, but the book, everyone needs to read the book, because it helped me tie all this kind of together. Words matter, and the language that you give people in that, because it's kind of, even with the working genius, you're feeling something, right? You're noticing something. I talked with someone earlier, and a lot of her coaching has to do with like what you feel in your body when these certain things occur. You're feeling these things, but you don't have that language for how to go about changing the things that are happening. And so I think the book does a beautiful job of that. And I'm hoping that you and I can figure out a way to merge these two together, because to me it makes a whole lot of sense. So, and I know I have taken us well beyond time here. We've gone over, but I already knew that when we were going to get together, I was very excited about this all week long, because I haven't really sat down with this because of efficiency, and that this gave me permission to do that and kind of glue these things together. So I'm so glad that you were able to join me today. Do you can you just tell us how to get in touch with you? And as also, oh no, actually, I do want to ask one more question, because
okay.
And then I'll get us along here. What is currently bringing you joy right now?
What is currently bringing me joy is that my husband and I are expecting our first kiddo. And so it's just the joy of the excitement of what just happened on your face, because being the one that this is going to be this big change in our lives. My husband's great. He's excited. Has all of the joy, but I can sometimes be like, oh, what is this going to mean? All of the wonder, discernment. I'm sure there's a lot of working genius we could get into in that, but like, here's how things are going to change, and and the tenacity comes out of what's the plan. But my favorite joy thing is when I say that to people and I get to see their face light up, because it's a beautiful reminder of, oh yes, this is such a joyous, exciting thing. And I am excited, but sometimes I can get caught up in the doing of all of the things instead of enjoying the joy of it.
No, that is perfect. Yes, that is total. That is a normal reaction to that, both sides of that. So yeah, that's very joyful. And based on the story that you told in the book, you have the mom bag for that, right?
I do.
So and I thought that was a perfect example of how we can react to things and not let them go. So that is amazing. I'm so glad I remembered to ask that question. So
yeah.
Awesome. All right. Okay. So now, where can we get the book, and how can we get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can get the book anywhere that books are sold. If you want a special discount as a thank you for listening to this podcast, you can go to nohonesty.com/podcast, and it's a 40% discount off of the book. So that's KNOW honesty.com/podcast, and you'll find that discount there. Otherwise, you can get it anywhere books are sold. And through that, you can also reach out to me via our website, or you can shoot me an email, grace@nohonesty.com, and we can have a conversation, because I hope it's clear, but I love talking about this stuff and thinking about it and how could it be different? Or is there another way we could do this? So there's my wonder coming out.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Thank you so much, Grace.
Thank you.